The sudden sound of a life collapsing often begins not with shouting, but with a question that won't leave your mind. How does someone who once walked the halls of power wake up one morning to find every door silently locked behind them? How does a woman who survived decades of storms suddenly face the one she never saw coming? And why did Buckingham Palace choose this moment, after 32 complicated years, to cut Sarah Ferguson off with such finality? These questions hung like a quiet tension in the air long before sunrise on December 2nd, the day the world learned that the woman known to millions as Fergie had been stripped of every remaining royal privilege in a move so severe that even seasoned reporters struggled to process it. Her entire royal existence, once tolerated through tradition and nostalgia, was severed with a blunt and almost clinical efficiency that felt colder than any scandal she had faced before. In the early hours of that morning, while most of Britain slept, a senior palace aide delivered a message that would send shockwaves across global media. Sarah Ferguson would no longer receive royal housing, security support, or transitional assistance. Royal Lodge, her longtime home, the place tied to memories, family, and decades of complicated royal coexistence, was no longer hers. This wasn't a gentle phase-out or a diplomatic negotiation. It was immediate. It was unforgiving. And it was deliberate. The moment this announcement left the palace walls, newsrooms at BBC, Sky News, and CNN fell into chaos, scrambling to verify what sources insisted was true. Within minutes, broadcasters were sitting upright, reading through statements with wide-eyed disbelief at how abrupt the decision was. For years, Sarah's presence within the royal orbit had been something of a tolerated contradiction. Under Queen Elizabeth, who carried a soft nostalgia for the spirited redhead who married into her family in 1986, there was always a slim margin of forgiveness. Sarah was no longer a working royal. She had no HRH title, and she carried a catalog of scandals, but she had a motherly warmth, a familiarity, and enough public sympathy to justify her quiet proximity. But King Charles's monarchy is not built on sentimentality or fond memories. His reign prioritizes structure, function, hierarchy, and reputation management in a modern era where every shadow becomes an internet headline within seconds. In that calculation, Sarah became a liability, an anomaly who didn't fit into the slimmed-down, future-focused plan. Behind the scenes, the decision had been building for years. Royal Lodge had become an uncomfortable subject, expensive to maintain, complicated by Prince Andrew's legal troubles, and increasingly questioned by the public. Why was a divorced duchess with no royal duties living on crown property? Why did the estate continue to drain funds when the monarchy claimed to be streamlining operations? These questions only grew louder as Westminster quietly pressed for accountability, especially in the years following the Epstein fallout. Public polling revealed rising frustration toward the York household, frustration that advisors warned could bleed into the monarchy's broader reputation if left unanswered. One unexpected figure who noticed the early signs was Catherine, Princess of Wales. During briefings in early 2023, she observed subtle anomalies in internal reports, public perception graphs showing spikes of negativity tied not only to Andrew, but increasingly to Sarah herself. Advisors whispered about unresolved associations, resurfaced controversies, and the growing sense that silence from the palace was no longer protecting them, but harming them. At one charity event that year, a well-meaning attendee voiced concerns directly to Catherine, echoing the very sentiments analysts had been mapping behind closed doors. It was a moment that confirmed what some had feared. The public had already formed opinions the palace was too slow to address. Queen Camilla, experienced and steely in matters of reputation strategy, took decisive action. She convened private meetings in the Green Drawing Room with a small circle of crisis experts, including Sir Edward Chapman, communications strategist Fiona Lyle, and media veteran Rupert Kane. Reports from American outlets had begun shifting attention away from Prince Andrew and towards Sarah, resurfacing Epstein-related emails where she had once referred to Andrew as a supreme friend, re-examining her financial disasters like the Pegasus Bitcoin debacle, and pointing to revived congressional inquiries that made palace advisors uneasy. The growing sense was that Sarah, once seen as harmless and occasionally chaotic, was now drifting into dangerous territory that could trigger international embarrassment. Princess, and always direct, didn't mince words. She insisted that the monarchy had enough burdens to carry forward and couldn't afford to drag the unresolved past along with it. Prince William, thinking generationally about the future awaiting George, Charlotte, and Louis, emphasized the necessity of removing controversies that could overshadow his children's eventual roles. His team provided data showing American viewers over 50 expressing moral frustration toward the York controversies, a demographic crucial to the monarchy's soft power influence abroad. After weeks of strategic polishing, the final statement was crafted to sound neutral, procedural, and devoid of personal attack. But neutrality didn't soften the blow. At exactly 7:20 a.m. on December 2nd, it went live, and with it came the crisp finality of a door closing forever. Sarah Ferguson, who had weathered decades of public humiliation, financial ruin, tabloid cruelty, and personal reinventions, learned of her fate in a London hotel suite, where she had sensed that something was wrong but hadn't expected this level of brutality. Her phone flooded with messages as the world reacted faster than she could absorb the words that ended her royal connection. Global outlets portrayed the move as a decisive step in modernization. It correlated conveniently with Andrew's relocation to Sandringham, renewed Epstein pressures, and murmurs of parliamentary demands for ethical clarity from all institutions with historical ties to questionable figures. Sarah's story was reframed, not as one of resilience, but of tragic misjudgment. Her past scandals, once softened by time, were now revisited under harsher light. Her daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, watched the chaos unfold with hearts already braced for impact. Though devastated, they were not surprised. They had sensed the tide turning long before the announcement, and they acted with quiet precision. Understanding the risk their mother now carried, they arranged for her rapid transition to their property in Comporta, Portugal, a location distant, private, and importantly, outside the easy reach of certain pressures tied to U.S. investigations. Behind the palace's public reasoning were deeper, unspoken motives. First, the lingering Epstein associations created a legal necessity to distance the institution from anything that could lead to future scrutiny. Severing ties with Sarah ensured the palace could truthfully deny institutional connections if U.S. inquiries expanded. Second, Sarah's financial instability, marked by a history of debts and emergency aid requests, created an uncomfortable dependency the palace no longer wanted to maintain. Third, American audience polling made it clear that accountability was necessary to sustain international support, especially in a media landscape where trust erodes quickly. Fourth, William's vision for his future reign required a clean slate, free from the scandals that defined the 1990s. And fifth, relocating Sarah to Portugal provided a practical layer of distance without publicly framing it as exile. Palace legal teams immediately began reviewing Crown Estate statutes to ensure no path existed for her reinstatement. The decision reshaped not only Sarah's future, but Prince Andrew's world as well, leaving him isolated, contained, and stripped of power while she faced a new and uncertain reality abroad. Without Home Office protection, she would be responsible for funding her own security, travel, and risk mitigation, all while carrying decades of personal knowledge about the monarchy. Advisors quietly acknowledged that someone in her position could easily become a media threat. Interviews, memoirs, confessions, any of these could spiral into global sensation. William and Catherine recognized the risk, but accepted it as a necessary trade-off. Institutions, they understood, survive not by shielding individuals, but by protecting their future relevance. For Beatrice and Eugenie, the emotional weight was overwhelming. They had spent years defending their mother's reputation, leaning on her strength, and watching her rebuild herself after every setback. Now they were forced to protect her once again, but this time from a final rejection delivered by the very institution their grandmother had dedicated her life to. Their urgency came from fear, not only of permanent exile, but of the psychological toll this severance might take. They coordinated legal teams, sorted documents, and managed logistics, all while wondering whether their mother would ever again walk through the doors of the country she had called home since her youth. International reactions reflected the complexity of her story. Many Americans saw the decision as overdue accountability. In Britain, generational divides shaped opinions. Older citizens felt the move was unnecessarily harsh, while younger audiences viewed it as essential cleanup. European commentators examined it as a potential blueprint for modernizing traditional institutions. Across Commonwealth nations, feelings ranged from sympathy to frustration, with some perceiving the news as yet another reminder of the monarchy's ongoing internal turmoil. Sarah's silence that first evening was striking. Known for her candid nature and tendency to speak openly, her quiet response revealed the depth of the shock. In her hotel room, surrounded by advisors, daughters, and loyal friends, she began planning not an emotional reaction but a methodical survival strategy. She had reinvented herself countless times, through divorce, public disgrace, financial ruin, and social exile. But this was different. This time the door had not simply closed, it had been bolted shut. The institution she once married into had formally declared she no longer had a place within its walls. The monarchy's decision, while strategic, came with risks. History has shown that the people pushed out of royal circles often become the ones who shake the foundations. The former Duke of Windsor, Princess Margaret, Princess Diana. Their stories became reminders that exile does not silence, it amplifies. In a modern media landscape where everyone has a platform, forcing someone with knowledge, experience, and emotional stake into isolation can create outcomes no advisor can fully predict. Yet within this upheaval lies a truth often overlooked. Forced endings can also lead to unexpected beginnings. Sarah may now face a life free from royal protocol, expectations, and silent scrutiny. She has the freedom to speak, write, reflect, and rebuild in ways she never could inside the monarchy's shadow. This newfound independence could become either a soft retreat into private life or the foundation for a powerful new chapter, one that redefines her legacy beyond scandals and royal labels. Portugal, in many ways, represents the quiet she has long needed. A place where her name doesn't echo through every newspaper, where she can live without the weight of royal history pressing down on her shoulders. For Charles, the move reinforces his goal of a smaller, accountable monarchy. For Sarah, it may be the beginning of her first truly independent life since 1986. In the end, power shapes the rules of institutions, but individuals shape the stories that outlive them. Sarah Ferguson, controversial yet undeniably resilient, now holds a unique kind of influence, the power to choose how her story continues after the palace turned its back. Whether she fades into peaceful obscurity or decides to reveal the truths only she carries, her next steps will determine how future generations understand this moment. As the world watches, interpreting every detail through cultural, social, and personal lenses, one thing is clear. This December shock is not the end of Sarah Ferguson's saga. It is the beginning of a chapter no one, not even palace strategists, can fully predict. Will she remain silent, or will she speak? Will she rebuild, or retaliate? That question may echo far beyond the year it began. If you found this story compelling and want to follow the next twists in the royal world, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss an update.